Hello, dear friends, friends of Keshet Eilon. Welcome and shalom to the Keshet Eilon daily masterclasses, summer Mastercourse 2021. And I'm really happy and privileged to introduce you an outstanding pedagogue, violinist, Dr. Robin Wilson, who is the head of violin at the Australian National Academy of Music in Melbourne. And today he belongs to us, to Keshet Eilon, and it's really our honor to give the stage to Robin Wilson.
Thank you so much, Itzhak, for that warm welcome. And it's a pleasure to be here, albeit virtually. And congratulations to you and the whole team there for making this course happen virtually. Even for people such as myself down under at the bottom of the world in Australia, it's wonderful that I can participate still, as can all of the students around the world. So thank you very much. So I believe our first performer today is Issa Khoury, and he will be playing Bach Sarabande from the Partita No. 2 in D minor. Bravo. Very well done, Issa. And it's lovely to hear you play and nice to see you in person. So look, that was the beautiful performance of this movement. I do appreciate your choice of tempo for this particular movement. It's really a Sarabande grave, which was very much a movement that had an emotion of kind of melancholy and seriousness. And I thought you captured that quite well at times. And the tempo choice was very much appropriate for that type of movement. Sarabandes, we should know, in the 17th century tended to be fast movements. In the 18th century, they became sort of the heart of the suite, if you like, and were often just prior to jigs or more frivolous movements. That's very significant because it really allows us to understand the emotional nature of the work, to know that it was the heart of a particular suite. This is, however, a dance. It's a sarabande grave was really a noble French court dance. And the high French Baroque dances were highly stylized. And I would say that's what I'm missing the most from your performance, is this sense of dance. Now, we've got to understand, I'm sure you're aware that a sarabande, we feel that the characteristic nature of the sarabande is the lean on the second beat, which I'm sure you are probably aware of, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I hear that slightly at times, but we should know that that didn't mean that Bach always wrote a emphasis on a second beat. So he does in many places in his sarabands, but often we don't get emphases on second beats. And we see that in the cello suites as well. But he certainly gives us that at the beginning of this movement. I find that the nature of that second beat, it's helpful to understand that a dotted crotchet was really the push-off for the dancer. So we would have a push-off on a second beat, which would lead to this sort of sense of levity. And if you like, that quaver at the end of the bar is really just a hovering on your toes. And so that's the function of that reflective second beat. The reflection really was a chance to sort of propel the dancer forward. So it's much like you imagine, a roller coaster that goes up and then it comes naturally down onto the next beat. The little quaver at the end of the bar, however, is not an upbeat, because sarabands don't begin with upbeats, and it's very unusual for a dance movement to assume an upbeat figure if it doesn't begin with one. So we really have to tuck that quaver in. So what I'd like to work at to begin with is to see if we can achieve more of the sense of this dance with the lilt on the second beat. We'll find that instrumentally through a little more resistance with the bow on the on these. I'll stand so you can see me. Here we are. A little more resistance against the string on the second beat as opposed to the first beat. Now, you used a lot of vibrato in places where we wouldn't necessarily want to emphasize that beat. So, for example, the first beat, if you vibrate it a lot, your second beat's naturally, unless you do even more than that, going to sound weaker, which is what happened. So let's just try this opening and see if we can find, first of all, this sense of lean and reflection on those second beats. Very good. Very nice. I thought that was better. And although I didn't tell you to vibrate less, you were starting to get a sense of not using the vibrato just at random. Remember, vibrato is a highlighter, effectively. It's a musical highlighter. It's going to highlight whatever you apply it to. And in the Baroque era, of course, it was used as an ornament. It was used, we know that, because treatises reference vibrato, but it was probably a very different type than we are accustomed to. So treat it as an ornament and use it to your advantage in a rhetorical sense to bring out what you truly want us to notice more. So you bring certain things into brighter relief and let other things be less important. let's see now, if we have a look at those first 4 bars, what we also notice is that Bach writes very much dissonance on these second beats. So it doesn't, however, mean that we can't also be more aware of the importance of the bass line, and particularly the dominant harmony in the second bar. So if we have, here we've got our dominant 7th, and that allows us to show a hierarchy of those 2 bars, so they're not exactly the same. That second bar can be a little more because there's a lot more tension in it. We can also, although we're emphasizing the second beat, I think we need to hear that wonderful diminished 5th at the beginning, and that C sharp. So see now if you can give us a little more hierarchy of those first 2 bars. Then when you get here, we've got this resolution at the start of the bar on the first beat. So rather than then give us more on that dominant again. He's given us another one with a suspension at the top. So he's giving us that dissonance again on the second beat. Again, a suspension over that dominant with that dominant 7th. Well, it's a dominant 7th going to the 3rd. So let's see if we can do that. Our second bar having more than the first, so we're not hearing everything is the same, and showing those second beats after that. Can we just try that again? Very good. Very good. Great, Issa. So the way I think that you're going to have to work at this is to think of dissonance as resistance in the bow. So if we think of resistance against the string, we're going to use a denser, slower bow speed, and that results in a denser sound. And that really reflects the tension implicit in that harmony. And we can then reflect the release by allowing that resistance to come away a little. So you're using a lot of bow the whole time. So I see sort of an even amount of bow speed and bow distribution throughout. If we can use this a little more, in a slightly more sophisticated way, we don't need to start at the heel because we don't want a big first beat, and really feel the resistance for those second beats and the dissonances. So something a little more slower bow speeds. And if we want more in the second bar, we could use a bit more bow on that second. You can see how it gives us more of a sense of lean if we feel that resistance. Do you want to give that a go? Now that's terrific. Now, if we had more time, we could talk about vibrato and what might be appropriate for this movement. I think you have to also be aware that your vibrato is great, but it's quite exciting. It makes me feel excited about this opening chord, and perhaps the speed of the vibrato sometimes needs to reflect the mood of what we're playing a little more. I would encourage you to probably not worry about making a beautiful sound with the left hand in the opening, more with the bow, and leave the vibrato from the first chord perhaps, so that you can really get a sense that the middle, then it will just help to highlight and make that intention clearer. I think the vibrato can often be there as a blanket to sort of help us feel comfortable. And it's very easy for us not to really apply it with any sense of purpose in terms of the musically speaking. Yeah. So give it one last go. Just seeing if we can tone the vibrato down a little on those downbeats. Keep feeling the resistance. I thought that was better. If you can release at the resistance, end of the resistance, by slowing the bow and releasing and tucking in the quaver, we'll really get a sense of that levity that I was talking about of the dancer. Great. Sorry to interrupt you. Very good. Very good. Just one last thing. Can you really feel that the first beat flows to the second? So you'll just ponder us a little on the first beat. It's lasting a little too long now. So really feel like that first beat is flowing in. So we're not too heavy. We always have to keep the spin of a 3 if we want to feel a dance. Very good. Yeah, I thought that was really beautiful. The second bar, you tend to ponder again on the first beat, or reflect on the first beat instead of the second. So here, go straight to the second beat. The resolution's not so interesting, right? The D minor's not so interesting. That's interesting, and that's second beat. Just go from there and keep going. Okay, very nice. So I'd like to have a look at another element of this piece that I feel would really help the dance aspect of it. When we get to the end of this first line, we start to feature a lot of embellishment. And what that really means is there are a lot of notes which are not really part of the chord necessarily. They're passing notes, and they're just decoration around a skeleton of harmony. So, here, that's just helping us to feel a kind of fall onto the seventh chord. Here we've got just a short scale functioning as an upbeat. Yeah? He could have written in this bar, I think, something, instead of the scale that we have, we could have something like, that's really what the skeleton is, but he's decorated it. Now, what you have to really make sure of when you play Bach, and this applies to the Grave, A minor Grave, or the G minor Adagio, is that the decoration is never heavy and melodic. I always give students a quote from Roger Donington, who is a wonderful musicologist, and he always says, the blacker the notes, the lighter the performance. So just meaning, when Bach writes embellishment and writes faster notes, they're less important, and they need to be less sung, in a sense. So what makes your Sarabande at times not feel so dance-like and become a little heavy is that you tend to emphasize every one of those passing notes because you're singing it. You're being a beautiful, very good violinist. But it will be more beautiful if you can let them be and just flow through them. So to a second beat. And you can see instead of putting the ninth of the chord, you know, this is, he puts it right up the octave. So there's even more sort of longing onto that high A, isn't there? And that's really our destination. But you could hear how it was flowing through that figuration. Can you go from that bar? We don't want, because it becomes in six. And we're emphasizing every quaver beat. We're really still heading to second beats and flowing. Yeah, very nice, very nice. Very nice. No, good. I know I'm stopping you a lot. Apologies. But we have such limited time. And there's always so much to explore in Bach. Here, we've got a trill on the note, which is an embellishment. It's a decoration. It's a highlighter, if you like. I don't think we need vibrato and a trill. That's like a double whammy. You know, that's like putting sugar and honey on something. We don't need quite that much. So you can vibrate if you like the dissonance, although I would encourage you to get the expression from the bow and the clash. Really, you know, feel that, and then feel the wonderful relief on the F sharp. So I would really release that F sharp rather than highlight it, you know? This is what I'm talking about in terms of tension and release in the music, which is intrinsic to all of Bach because it's harmonically composed. And we just have to feel that and find ways of, I think, bringing that out with the bow first and foremost. That was great. Then here, you could do a big, big first beat, or you could just let the music continue there and not emphasize the first beat quite so much, because really be lovely to have a sort of longer phrase at that point. Do you want to try that and then keep going? I won't make you play the repeat, so go on to the second half. All I would say about the repeat is I think you can vary it dynamically so much more. It needs to be really different. If you do repeats in Bach, that's one thing that we read time and time again in quants and all these treatises is they never, you know, played the same thing twice in the same way, particularly if it was a repeat. So you did do a little ornament up, which I thought was really nice at the end of the repeat, but you could start the repeat very softly or do something really contrasting. Yeah, but why don't we just have one more go at that, and from here. Beautiful. Sorry, I forgot to mention as well, you're splitting this, that bowing. Now, my personal sort of philosophy is split something if it's really unplayable and if you can't make the bowing work somehow. But remember that in Baroque playing, slur markings are not bowings. Slur markings are articulations. They actually instruct us as to what to emphasize, because first notes of slurs were always slightly more emphasized than last notes of slurs. So they're very significant for achieving a kind of emphasis, and they were right through into the Romantic period as well. If we look at composers throughout the 19th century, first notes of slurs through the classical, very significant. So I don't know if there's any good reason to split it. Do you? What you could do then is very surreptitiously tuck in an up bow. Yeah? And I think even if you had a shorter Baroque bow, you'd manage. Do you want to just try that? Well done. So a few things through this section. Be very careful when you want to play with heightened intensity in Bach. Really avoid the temptation to become aggressive. So, there's lots of extraordinarily heightened emotion in Bach. He was human. I mean, yes, his music was written for the glory of God, but it was also written for the refreshment of the soul, as he said. So we know that he... we can become excited in Bach, but just don't let it become aggressive. So if you become excited at that dominant, try not to lift the bow and kind of hit it. I noticed you did that in another place, further on, where you kind of had a slightly aggressive articulation. Just avoid the temptation, and always just think of heightened expression in Bach as being something that is noble and reverent. If you keep that integrity there of that note, that sort of reverence, as if you're looking up in a huge cathedral and you feel so awe-inspired, you can play with just as much intensity, but it will never border on what we might feel is something inappropriate. Trills start from above, so always in Baroque music, trills start from above. So this means you play the fifth rather than... And of course it's impossible to hold the G longer. So... And then here again we've got this seventh on the second beat. So whenever you see things like dissonances or a seventh chord on a second beat, I think that's Bach writing in the nature of the Sarabande into the harmony. It's that much in the DNA of the piece at times. So make sure that is what is the feature in the bar. And then you have another embellishment, which really needs to lead. You'll often notice Bach writes shorter little demi-semi-quavers, or what are they, 30-second notes? I think that's the right division. He often writes them at the end of bars, as if to tell us to sort of flow. Yeah? So what I want to do, though, is I want to jump to the next line, just because I'd like to just have a look at some dynamic contrast here and the way that we might just achieve that. So if we go from the C major just one tiny little thing, which is, you don't have to know this, but this here, when you have the third of a chord, this is a C major chord. When you have the third of the chord, the E, falling to the root of the chord, that's called an Ablauf, which is just a group of notes. So it's not actually an upbeat. So avoid. It's not that. It's just. Yeah, that's just a little thing. But this seventh. This second beat is a resolution, so it needs to be less. Dominant. Now we've got the sequence, we can really start less. And second beat is the feature. So it's really handy to really recognize those important chords. They're not always dominant seventh chords or dominant chords on second beats. We can have resolutions as well, but achieve a little more of the dynamic contrast in the line and keep that second beat possibility there. Yeah? Can you go from the C major at the beginning of the line? Think of it. Sorry, Issa. You have to think, to play an Ablauf, you have to think of it as one gesture, one grouping. It's just a chord with a couple of the notes of the chord tacked on afterwards. So it all should sound like it belongs together. So you just play them less. Just very small bows, and don't take time over them. And then you go straight to that second beat, which is very intense because it's not only the highest note that we get in the piece, but of course it's the seventh of our C major chord. So now, if we were using, very good, much better. If we were using a Baroque bow, I'm sure you understand this, but it's worth saying anyway, or reminding ourselves that the whole thing about the Baroque bow was the inability to sustain in the upper half. So you would get a natural decay, and this is what I was talking about with slurs. You always have the beginning of a note or a stroke being stronger than the end, because of this bow shape and the bow design. So what that means is slurred duplets need to be nuanced in that way. First note of slur. Or, yeah? So you're playing very legato, like what the feature of a taut model bow was, this legato. So if you play... We're not going to sound like we're sort of nuancing. The problem with legato in Bach is that it equalizes everything. You know, and Baroque music is really about inequality because it's about harmony, and not all harmony can be equal. So, or not all notes are equal, obviously. So use much less bow here. And you can just take a tiniest bit of time and find your way. Release the downbeat and go straight to the second beat. So again, we have the for reflection is on that second beat. Can we just try from, I think we can go just here. Again, go to the second beat. And you could vibrate the F sharp, which is the important note. Sorry, I just want to draw you. I'm sorry to stop you so much. Be very careful about emphasizing those weak beats. And vibrating them a lot. I'm exaggerating, of course. But, if you do that, what we get is our ear becomes confused because suddenly that D sounds like the most important note of the phrase. So you really have to, it would help you probably to sing these bars before you play them. So you don't have the instrumental habits guiding the musicianship. Yeah. You want always to have your logic and understanding connected to your intuition, of course, and just the technique obeys rather than leads the way. So just be careful of that less on the D. Should we just try that once more? You could change the contact point and achieve a more flautando color, couldn't you? You come to the bridge. So we get much more dynamic contrast, but also color. The texture, the density of the sound changes. Still more less bow here. Be daring. Just humor me and be daring. And less. Don't vibrate this madly because you'll highlight it, and we want the second beat to be the feature. Can you just try that for us from here? Yeah, good. So to make less of this, you just use less bow. You don't want the whole bow and wait. So less bow and fast retake. Yeah, you still played. You took a long time. So it's also because it's the end of a structural section. I'm very aware that I'm running a little overtime. So how about just to finish, we just look at the very final line. I just thought in the coda, again, if you can remember all these things that I've mentioned, like first notes of slurs, the harmony, highlighting it, this ending would be much more effective. So from this diminished seventh, first notes of these slurs, dominant, first note not important, second note is important. So there's a lot more nuance in that last line. Can you just try that for us? That's it. And I would also say, I mean, it's beautiful. That was really beautiful, the way you just played. You could even go for a kind of open string purity if you wanted to. But look, there are some ideas there to help your understanding of Bach. Remember, Bach is like language. It must be rhetorical in the sense that it must convince us. Just like when I speak, I have to convince you of what I'm telling you through the inflection of my language and the syntax and the grammar. And everything that we're sort of working on is really about peeling back the layers and understanding the construction, understanding the syntax, the grammar, using our bow to bring all of that out so that we understand your Sarabande a little more in vivid relief than what you presented, which was very beautiful, but I think there's room for it to grow and develop. So I hope that helps. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Great. So I believe next we have Anthony Chan playing Ravel Tzigane. Bravo, Anthony. Well done. And I believe you recorded that in lockdown in Sydney there. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, not easy to do without piano in the midst of lockdown. So well done. You managed many of the difficult elements of this piece very, very well. And I appreciate also a very sort of strong sound, expressive sound at times, which was also really fantastic. So lots of good things, okay? However, we're here for ways to improve your Tzigane. So the main thing I would want to work with you on today after this performance is rhythm. Now, I think it's important not just to say that, but to really understand why I'm saying that. And that means getting to the heart of Tzigane a little more in terms of what is this piece and what is it all about. We know Tzigane means gypsy. We know it was written for a Hungarian violinist, Zsály, yeah? And Ravel, in fact, met her. She at a salon in Paris. She played his duo, I think it was for violin and cello, that had just been completed a couple of years before he began Tzigane. He heard her play. She was a very fiery player. And he asked her to play some gypsy melodies at the end of the performance. And then he asked her to play some more, and they kept going. And apparently it lasted until about 5 a.m. So that was this inspiration for Tzigane. Sure, we understand where that came from, but we also have an article from the year that it was written where Ravel was interviewed, and he said himself that first and foremost, this piece was a violin piece for violin virtuosos. It was not a piece to evoke Hungary. In other words, it wasn't, he said, it wasn't to Budapest like La Valse was to Vienna, or is to Vienna. So in other words, what we're dealing with here is really Tzigane in essence, in spirit, gypsy spirit, but it's really more of a pastiche. He uses elements of gypsy music. So we've got the gypsy scale, we've got rhythmic kind of figuration, which is quite gypsy in that sense. He's got tempo relationships and accelerandi that begin slow, that sort of imitate what we often hear in chartish music. So there's elements of this. He also, of course, you'll see he wrote one version for violin and luthiel, piano luthiel, which was this weird instrument that was sort of obsolete even before it was invented, basically. But it was this attachment to a piano which had cymbals in it, so it sort of imitated the cimbalom. another Hungarian instrument. So there were sort of nods in that direction, right? But ultimately, that's the essence of his intention with Tzigane. You have to understand Ravel himself was not anything other than a fastidious, slightly OCD man. He dressed immaculately, he was a consummate sort of elegant French gentleman. He was, I've got the score here, and there's, if you see the manuscript of his Tzigane, it's so neat. When he composed, he used a ruler to align everything. Don't know if you can see that, but it's beautiful to see. It's incredibly immaculate. And, he was OCD. He would go into his hotel room, and the very first thing he had to do out of ritual was to align all of his toiletries in a line on his dresser, apparently. And they had to be evenly spaced. They had to be all like in a proper line, so this is the sort of man he was. So why am I telling you all this? Because what it means is that what he writes is really important to notice. And the rhythm in this, the cruel irony is, if you follow the rhythm that he writes, in fact, it's going to sound more improvised. And it will sound more gypsy, because he was such a genius composer. Like he really knew what he was doing, and he has written so much of that into the music. It's not to say there's not freedom in this piece in certain places. But first and foremost, we really need to understand what he's written. And that goes for the rhythm, but also tremendous amount of detail in the performance directions in the score, which will come, and we'll look at a few of those that I think are really important. But let's look at this very opening. So we obviously have this trochaic rhythm, which is characteristic of the Hungarian language. We all know that the first syllable of every word in Hungarian is accentuated, yeah? So we have magyar, we have Khoury, but never the opposite. So we need to compensate with the fact that the very first figure in this, if we play it up bow, is an up bow, is short, and then we're going to get a big down bow. And it's very easy to play it and have the down bow be the strong beat, or the strong note. Yeah? Very easy for that to happen. So we need to compensate for that on the first figure. To your credit, you held the first note, which is often cut short. You did hold it right, but then you didn't play what he's written here. So we have, in this next beat, it's not. Yeah, so you can see the rhythm. It's so much more gypsy-like if we do what he writes. Tell me, before we begin this, what would you say a gypsy is? What's the character of, what do we mean when we say gypsy? What are we thinking about in terms of characterization?
Very free-spirited, nomadic people who have a lot of, it's a lot of passion, there's a lot of history with it, but obviously a lot less, I don't know, it's not dignified, but just, they're carefree, I guess. Very carefree.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Absolutely. So I would add a few adjectives in there. I would say, you need to think of things like volatile, capricious, unpredictable kind of in nature. The fact is, gypsies weren't educated to conform to society. So there's always this sort of wild spirit underneath. And, if you think of probably the most famous gypsy in music is Carmen, of course, and we never know whether she's going to stab us or kiss us, and that's the nature that we're getting at with this unpredictability. So in that very rhythm there, we have the essence of gypsy. That is really so much more exciting than, isn't it? It's more capricious, it's more unpredictable, it's more volatile. So let's do this first section. So we have 2, 3, 4. And then we have 2, 3, 4. And then we have a close of sentence. And he deliberately writes something that has much more weight and gravitas, being the semiquaver. Yeah, for the end of the sentence.
Yeah.
And that has to be different.
Sure.
So let's hold all the notes. You cut the tie in the second bar and the tie in the third bar quite short. We didn't get those accents on the yada, the maja figure, and the rhythm in the second bar. Let's just see if we can get that. That's right. Yes. Ba-da-la-la-lam-ba-da, yum-ba-da. How long is that beat? We have to hold it all the way to the third beat. Ba-da-la-la-lam-ba-da, 2, off. Sorry, I'm going to keep stopping you because I just really want you to understand what the rhythm of the opening is, because it's famously misplayed and all the time. And I think it's not that the written note, that we only play what's on a score to create music that is convincing. It's always a starting point, but I think it's so important to understand what's here, because it's so much more effective. So this is 2, off. There's one crotchet rest. You waited a lot longer. And then here you really have to play the up bow stronger. Yeah? Otherwise we get... Let's give it one more go. Really count like a maniac. Too short. So, yada-la-la-lum-ba-da. Well done. Okay, very good. That was what he wrote. You could still work on getting this dita strong weak really much more convincing. I would also say here, if we were going to work on, I mean, you're making a very good sound at the beginning there. If you're going to, improve it, you can practice without the vibrato, and then increase the vibrato as you go through the note, so that we really always have enough oxygen in our lungs as such. But I don't want to get stuck on sound production now, because you're already making a sort of fat, juicy sound in the beginning. The next bar, however, can you tell me what the rhythm is in that fifth bar?
Semiquaver, guide quaver, so ta-ta, ta-ta.
What were you playing? You know what you were playing?
Ta-da, same thing as before.
Yeah, you were playing exactly the same as the beginning. You were playing the demi-semi. Yeah. So very, very important. Let's just try that. Okay, good. Now, well done. Yes. I would say when you play rhythmically, it doesn't negate having direction in a phrase. And when you have direction in a phrase, it doesn't necessarily mean it's okay to be so extreme that it's not quite logical. So if you play, for example, it sounds a little like you're trying to prove a point with the rhythm, which you might have been then. But if we play, we just have a sense of where that phrase is going. It can still be quite rhythmic, but it's different, isn't it? And similarly here, you can absolutely flow forward. It just has to sound slightly more logical. It was sort of, it was almost just disproportionate in the way that you flowed. So if you decide to accelerate something or the reverse, make sure we can kind of understand the acceleration of that beat. Otherwise, it will just sound a bit random, you know? So give that one last go. Yeah, I mean, just be careful again whilst we're on rhythm, not to cut that first tie short, you know. But look, that's the idea. That's the idea. There were lots of these sorts of rhythmic things all the way through the first couple of pages, and I'm afraid you fell into the trap of, oh, it's a cadenza, so I don't need to pay so much attention. I'm free. Yeah. That would be like, you know, like playing the frozen improvisation, which is what Bach gave us, you know, in his Grave and Adagio. I mentioned that in the last masterclass for some reason. But being so free that it doesn't really resemble what he wrote. So
Sure. Yeah.
I think try not to fall into that trap. I'm not going to point everything out, but just know that you really need to go over it with a fine-tooth comb to sort of work those things out, okay?
Sure.
There's some other things that I want to address. The second thing that's an element of rhythm in this opening first two pages are rests. Now, silence is as important as sound. It serves without silence, in fact, sound doesn't have anything to make it that meaningful in a sense. You know, silence, something coming out of silence gives us a blank canvas for sound. So it's very important, and it's important rhetorically in a piece like this. So really notice all the rests that he's written, and they're different lengths, and the different lengths are important. All of the crotchets on the second half of that first page, as you're climbing up the G string, you almost didn't play any rests there. So those are significant. But just to prove a point, sometimes the rests are the same length, but they don't serve quite the same function. So if you look at the beginning, there's a quaver rest in that first bar. But we're really playing through that bar, aren't we? Directionally. At the end of that sentence, at the 4 bars, there's a quaver rest as well. But it feels really different because it's the end of the phrase and we need to take a breath. So you have to look at the rest and ascertain its function, if you like, in the line. And notice where he writes the fermatas. They need to be a little longer as well. Let's now go on to have a little look at some dynamic coloration and pacing as well, which was another thing that I thought you could do a lot more of. So can we go from here? Okay, all right. So good. Some things in here. Be careful of the beginning. It was better than what you played just before on the recording. On the recording, you played like very, very slowly, and it was very hard to understand that it really is more or less an upbeat. You can take a bit of time on it if you wanted, but it's a question of noticing what's really there. What would you say are the notes you want to bring out in these bars? Excuse me.
The B flat.
Both of those bars, that one and the following.
Yeah, the
Sorry?
E sharp, because of the E sharp towards the F sharp, that leading note kind of
Sure.
quality, and also that B flat once it gets to the B flat. So that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, the B flat, and then in the next bar, the B natural, the way that it changes. Yep. We sort of have that difference of sonority that I think would be good to highlight. You don't tend to vibrate either of those notes or spend any time on them. You sort of play over them very quickly. You could consider vibrating. You could consider one of them having a shift. Just one of them. I did that terribly, but you could have portamento could be a feature of one of those bars, yeah?
Sure.
Maybe not both, or depends how you do it. Then see if you can have a concept for the phrase where you don't do the same coloration in every bar, but we have a kind of development through the bar, a sense that we're searching, perhaps the line is developing, something is happening, then we're accelerating, then we're vivo. Things are changing rather than we're repeating the same thing. Can we just try that one more time? Oh, and Anthony, at the very end, there's a fermata. And yeah. And then we've got ba, 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 triplet, duplet. Just the rhythm there. We won't get stuck on it, but yeah, let's just keep going.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, Anthony, what about if you gave the B flat or the B natural, or both, a bit more length? And you could start a little softer, you know? I mean, you can play this bar full, you know, and then come away, or you could start it softly. There's lots of options. But give us a little more coloration somewhere, and then really try to take a little moment of time over the B flat and then the B natural. Just one more go. He has given you the license because he said tempo rubato, right?
Yeah.
So he's a tempo rubato in essence is applying a freedom that's impossible to notate. Yeah? Well done. That was so much better. So much better, yeah? Just be careful before at the tempo, the semiquaver upbeat, the triplet, duplet. You can look at that. Now, we're going to run out of time. So what I wanted to point out was a few more details in the score, okay?
Sure.
That we're missing and that really make this piece, I think, so much more interesting. when you get to here, then this next section, which can be much more tasto, much more contrasting. It's the next sort of large section, if you like, right? He writes these accents over the acciaccatura, under the acciaccaturas. Yeah? Then we have these hairpins. Dot, accent, dot, and accent. See if you can really get all of those details there. Sounds very different with the accent. It kind of really does something flavorful to the music. A little bit of, so when you go for it's just a matter of experimenting with the degree of release, the bow speed, the sort of depth that you get for the, how much gliss we do, how much of that portamento we actually do. But it's worth experimenting, and also making sure that your hairpin has a diminuendo as well as a little swell. Then I thought the rest of that page, you really just need to pace dynamically. The mezzo forte was, I think, already forte. You had nowhere to go. So aside from the rhythm, the dynamic pacing of that is really important. Again, some tempo pacing at the next rubato in the octaves. So he doesn't write an excel during this, but I think we have to flow forward a lot more. This is bar 38, during all of the... We really just have to start moving through that section. It was a little stayed. Some other details in the score that I would really encourage you to notice is the bowing in the main theme. So Ravel actually wrote little down bows, and then he wrote little up bows. And they're in the urtext as well. And you didn't seem to do them. And I would say repeated down bows are a sort of feature of gypsy music, and they add so much character. If you also really look at all of the little details, we've got accent, rest, and we've got tenuto, dot, tenuto, dot. It gives this wonderful kind of inflection here, yeah? So it's really worth exploring that. Let's just try the theme once, and then we're going to have to finish. I'd encourage you to think of this theme as sort of like, if we're thinking of a simple gypsy theme, it's what you might sort of play in the village. Yeah. It's not too espressivo. It's more kind of, just simple. So, very good. We've got dot, or if you don't have a dot on that second crotchet, depending on the edition. Yeah? So your dots are no different from your tenutos at the moment. Acciaccaturas have to be before beats. Just be careful. In the recording, it sounded like the rhythm we were trying to achieve at the beginning.
Sure.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Make sure of the rest as well. So just one last time. Yeah, that's getting there. You have to have definitely getting there. You must have a much stronger sense of the pulse because it wavers a little, but you can explore that. Yeah, I would say your crotchets maybe ended up being slightly too clipped at that point. Yeah, but you can certainly explore. Anthony, I know we're going to have to finish. One final parting thought would be really look at the tempo relationships all the way through. There are a lot of tempo relationships that you didn't quite notice. So when you get to figure 7, this has to be the same tempo because the clarinet has the solo. And it's still tempo primo. Ba, ba, ba.
Yeah.
Then be very careful. Poco più moderato at figure 8 is slower than what you have been. That section is slightly slower, and that's really important for the flavor. And if you don't do that, you will slow down at figure 9 to compensate, which is what you did. So then you played, and your poor clarinet would be lost. So there's quite a few things like this. The section where we have esitando, hesitating, going to, where is it? Esitando, accelerando, vivo, ral. All of these things really, really explore the tempo relationships. So I think if you can just delve into your score and ponder over it a lot more and sort of understand where Ravel was coming from, understand the notion of gypsy and what it means in the context of this piece, and use that as a sort of starting point to find what you really need to bring out and how. So much of a clue as to its effectiveness is in here. And you'll be well on your way to a fantastic Tzigane. Sorry, that's all we've got time for, but I hope that helps.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Well done.
Watson.
Bravo. Well done. So I think that's everyone for this evening. So thank you so much to Itzhak Rashkovsky and the entire team at the Keshet Eilon Music Center for making this virtual masterclass a possibility. Well done to both Issa and Anthony for their wonderful playing today.